Hello everybody, welcome back to this channel. My name is Haley. This is my true crime YouTube channel, and today I am sharing another Christmas related case. You may notice that I look the exact same as I did in my last video, and that's because I literally just finished recording the episode about the Covina massacre, and I decided I wanted to share this case with you guys as well. This is one that I covered on my podcast, so if you guys prefer to listen to podcasts, if you came across this video but you prefer podcasts or you're going on a drive somewhere and need a podcast to listen to, I highly recommend you stop watching this video and go listen to my podcast episode of this case. My podcast is called Inhuman, a true crime podcast, and I covered this case. I had to check, but I covered this case in episode 53 of my podcast, and I will link it down below as well. So if you guys want to listen to the podcast episode instead of watching the video, that will be right there for you. The podcast episode also includes commentary from my co-host, Andrea, and she is absolutely awesome, and she has some really good points and brings things up during the episode. So if that's what you're into, go check out that podcast episode. But I also wanted this story to have a place here on my true crime YouTube channel because, one, it's holiday related, and I think that it is important this time of year to remember victims that lost their lives during the holidays, but also because this case just baffles me and is one that has stuck with me for years, and it needed a spot on this channel. So today I am talking about the Lawson Family Murders that happened on Christmas Day in 1929. And just a trigger warning before we get into this case, this does involve child death and suicide, so I just wanted to put a blanket trigger out there. All right, so let's just get right into this. Charles Charlie Lawson was born on May 10th, 1886 in Lawsonville, North Carolina. And yes, you heard that right. Lawsonville. He lived in Lawsonville. His parents worked as sharecroppers, which is basically where people would rent a small patch of land for a farm, and then they would pay the landowner with a portion of their product. In 1911, Charles met a woman named Fanny Manring, and they got married shortly after. The two had 7 kids, 3 boys and 4 girls. The kids' names and their ages in 1929 when this incident happened were Marie, age 17, Arthur, 16, Carrie, 12, Maybelle, 7, James, 4, Raymond, 2, and Mary Lou, 4 months old. They also had another son, William, who was born in 1914, but he sadly died of pneumonia at just 6 years old in 1920. In 1929, Charles Lawson was 43 and Fanny was 37. Charles was described as a strict but devoted father, and the family was just a normal working class family. In 1918, the Lawsons had moved to Germantown, North Carolina, to be closer to Charles's brothers. When the family moved to the area, they were working on tobacco farms, and by 1927, they were able to purchase their own farm. They had saved enough money, and they purchased their farm that was located on Brook Cove Road in Germantown. So in 1929, the parents and their 7 kids lived on this farm, and they were living in a farmhouse that was pretty old and beat up. So in the evenings, Charles would go work on renovating the farmhouse with Fanny and their 2 oldest, Marie and Arthur. During these renovations, at one point, Charles was doing something and he got hit in the forehead, creating a gash on his forehead. He was okay, but neighbors and family members recalled years later that after that, Charles started acting kind of weird. People say that his temper would flare up more and it became more intense. And there's also some reports that say that Charles's doctor had reported that Charles had not been able to sleep. And then in December 1929, Charles did something that was a bit off for a family of the Lawsons' societal, financial status. Charles took his wife and 7 children into town to get new clothes and get a family portrait taken. So they went to Winston-Salem, which was about 13 miles away from Germantown, and they bought new clothes, and then they got this family portrait taken. This was just really strange because not many people got family portraits taken in 1929, especially people who were a working class family like the Lawsons. But to see the other side of this, the Lawsons had had their own farm for 2 years now, so maybe they had made enough money and Charles wanted to do this as, you know, a gift to the family for Christmas. According to some sources, Charles had said that this family portrait was a Christmas surprise, which some people think sounds really weird, especially knowing what happened just a few weeks later. There's also a lot of speculation about this portrait. As you can see, everybody has stone cold faces, no smiles. But I personally do think that this was pretty typical for portraits of this time period. But again, this was a posed family portrait in 1929, so I don't think we can speculate too much. A lot of this speculation has come from, you know, people that know what happened a few weeks later and then they're going back and looking at this photograph. But if we were to look at this photo without knowing that anything weird happened with the family, we probably wouldn't think it was that weird for a photo taken in 1929. So Christmas 1929 was an extremely cold one, and Marie, the oldest daughter, got up early to begin making her traditional Christmas cake. This was her signature dessert, and she got up really early that morning so she could bake the cake, ice it, decorate it, and get it all ready for Christmas dinner. A bit after Marie got up, Charles and the oldest son, Arthur, decided to go out and go hunting. At some point, they ran out of ammunition, and Charles sent Arthur into town to go get more ammunition. So a little later in the day, Marie was working in the kitchen. Fanny, the mother, was out on the porch peeling potatoes. And 12-year-old Carrie and 6-year-old Maybelle decided to go visit their aunt and uncle who lived nearby to wish them a Merry Christmas. So they left the house to go for this visit. Everybody else was in the house except for Charles, and Arthur was in town getting more ammunition. As the girls left the house, Charles was waiting outside of the tobacco barn with his gun. When they walked by, he shot them both, and he then bludgeoned them with a hoe handle to ensure that they were dead. He then placed them inside the tobacco farm and started moving toward the house. He shot Fanny, who was on the porch, and then went inside, and Marie was in the kitchen screaming because she had no clue what was going on. Charles burst in, hitting Marie, and she slumped down onto the floor in front of the fireplace after the blow. He then found James and Raymond, who were 2 and 4 and had gone off to hide, and he shot them. And lastly, he bludgeoned Mary Lou, the 4-month-old baby, to death. After he murdered everybody in the house, he placed them all on rock pillows, basically placing their heads on rocks and crossing all of their arms over their chests. Charles then ran off into the nearby woods. A bit later that afternoon, one of Charles's brothers, along with his kids, decided to stop by the Lawsons' house to wish the family a Merry Christmas. But when they got there, they found this absolutely gruesome scene. They found all of the dead family members laying inside the house, the blood-soaked rooms, and all of the furniture and everything inside the house that seemed to be in complete disarray. Arthur was still in town buying more ammunition when people started hearing about and talking about what had been found at the Lawsons' house. A police officer found Arthur, told him what was going on, and together they returned to the house to find everybody inside dead and Charles not there. By this point, a lot of people had heard about what was happening and had gathered at the house, and just before sunset, everybody that was at the house heard a gunshot. This gunshot came from the woods, and the family's 2 beagle dogs began crying out, and this led police to Charles's body. Police found Charles dead with 2 letters, both of which seemed to be unfinished. One letter said, quote, "troubles can cause," and the other letter said, quote, "blame nobody but." So they were both unfinished. We don't know what Charles meant with them. Police also found footprints encircling a big tree, as if Charles had been pacing for hours before he shot himself. So this case was huge and quickly started getting national attention, and people began showing up to the Lawsons' house to see the scene of this massacre. 2 days later, the entire family was buried into a single plot of land, and at least 1,500 people attended this funeral. All 8 caskets were lowered into the mass grave that had been dug by family and friends. And there's actually a giant, elaborate headstone for the Lawson family. And to me, it's just so weird seeing Charles's name so front and center, knowing that he was the one who did this. Shortly after the murders, Marion Lawson, Charles's brother, opened up the home as a tourist attraction. And this is the detail that has stuck with me for years. Remember that Christmas cake that Marie had been baking that day? It was still sitting out in the house, and tourists visiting started taking raisins from the cake as souvenirs. So they eventually had to put a glass cake saver over it, but why were these tourists taking raisins as souvenirs? Really weird. And also, this house was still a, uncleaned crime scene. This wasn't like today where, crime scenes get all cleaned up. This was pretty much how it was left after the massacre on Christmas Day, and tourists were walking through visiting. Marion claimed that he did this to raise money for Arthur, who was now an orphan, and said he also had to help pay for the Lawsons' farm mortgage. But he kept this open for 5 years, and tourists kept coming. All right, so now we're gonna dig into some of the theories of this crime. The first thought was that Charles had suffered some sort of head injury after he was hit while doing renovations on the home, and that this head injury led him to just crack and go crazy and kill his family. The coroner, Dr. C.J. Helsebeck of Danbury, performed the autopsies on the bodies, and they actually removed Charles's brain to examine it for any abnormalities. An autopsy of the brain was done at Johns Hopkins Hospital, but no abnormalities were ever found. Over the next 50 plus years, no one really knew what the motive behind this crime was, and that was how it stayed until a book was published in 1990. This book, called White Christmas, Bloody Christmas, was published in 1990, and it was written by M. Bruce Jones and Trudy J. Smith. The cover read, "Finally, the true story of the Lawson family murders on Christmas Day, 1929. So M. Bruce Jones was actually 8 years old when the murders happened, and he was living not far from the Lawsons. So he remembered this whole thing and the national attention that it got, and he was telling his daughter, Trudy Smith, all about it as she grew up. So the two decided to write this book together. Now, this book made a claim that Charles had been sexually abusing his oldest daughter, Marie, and that was the motive behind these murders. So where this theory comes from is a woman named Stella Lawson, who was interviewed for this book. So Stella Lawson was Charles's niece and the kid's cousin, and she had been interviewed for this book, but then the day before it was sent out to be published, she actually called the author with new information. Stella claimed that she overheard Fanny's sister-in-law and aunts, which included Stella's mother, Jettie Lawson, talking about how Fanny had confided in them that she had been concerned about an incestuous relationship between her husband and her oldest daughter. Now, it's important to note that Jettie passed away in 1928, so this conversation happened at least a year before the murders. This theory was further supported when another book came out in 2006. In The Meaning of Our Tears, a friend of Marie's, Ella May, claimed that a few weeks before Christmas that year, Marie had confided in her that she was pregnant by her own father. Ella May claims that Marie said that both of her parents knew about this. So this led a lot of people to believe that this was possibly Charles's motive. Now, I have seen some reports that say that Marie's autopsy did not show that she was pregnant, but this isn't really true. We don't even know if a proper autopsy on Marie's body was done. So it didn't show she was pregnant, but it also didn't not show that she was pregnant. And it's actually believed that a full-on autopsy was never done on Marie's body because the signature on her death certificate was by a medical examiner, and for a proper legal autopsy to be done, it must be done by a coroner. In this second book, a former neighbor of the Lawson family also came forward and said that he knew the family had been going through some stuff. He said it was personal stuff, so he did not want to reveal what it was, but he said that they had been going through some very intense stuff, and that's what may have led to the murders. There's also a ton of speculation about how Charles sent Arthur, the oldest son, into town to get ammunition that morning. Some people say, why would he have sent him into town to get ammunition if he knew he was going to murder the family? But there are a couple theories about this. The first, that I personally don't really think is accurate, is that Charles had planned on murdering Arthur when he came back from town, but Charles's brother and kids showed up before that, so Charles had to change his plans. There's another theory that is based purely on speculation, and I also don't think this one's true, but I'm including it for the sake of this video covering everything. But some people speculate that Arthur had actually found out about Marie's pregnancy, and Charles wanted him to live so that if rumors came up after the murders, he would be able to squash them, because according to this theory, Arthur did not believe it to be true. Again, that's just based purely on speculation. The next theory is that Charles sent Arthur into town because he believed that Arthur would be able to stop him during the attack. Arthur was the oldest son. The next oldest son was only 4 years old. So the likelihood that anybody else in the family would be able to fully stop Charles from attacking them was on the lower side. But if Arthur were there, he was 16 years old, he was strong, he was a hunter, he was a worker, so he'd probably be able to at least attempt to stop Charles. There's another theory that says that Charles possibly wanted to have the Lawson family namesake live on, and that's why he sent Arthur away that morning. Arthur not being killed would allow that Lawson namesake to live on, so that's where that theory comes from. Personally, I think that it's the third one, that Charles thought that maybe Arthur could stop him, so he didn't want him there. A couple of last things related to this case that I want to share with you guys. First of all, there is a folk song that is about this case. It's called The Story of the Lawson Family, and it was recorded by the Stanley brothers in March 1956. This song is a murder ballad, which is basically where an artist would tell a story of a murder in the format of a song. And honestly, I think it's a little bit creepy. There's also reports that the house and the farm were haunted after the murders. People have said that they see figures in the house, and they see figures in the surrounding wooded areas on the farm. There's also a legend that at the family's grave, whenever snow falls or leaves fall from trees, anything falls, it basically avoids Charles's headstone. It falls everywhere else but Charles's headstone. Arthur Lawson unfortunately passed away in a motor accident in 1945 at age 32, and he left behind a wife and 4 children, and also any potential answers that we could ever get in this case. And that is the case of the Lawson family murders. It is extremely devastating and very bizarre, and that damn Christmas cake just sticks in my mind. Be sure to let me know your guys' thoughts on this case down in the comment section below. I hope you guys are having a great holiday season, and I hope that you can take just a moment to remember the Lawson family this holiday season. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can see more videos, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.